Okay, let's dive in. If you're here, you're probably like us, really into cars. Maybe specifically that sideways action, but also trying to be smart with your money.
Definitely.
Today, we're digging into this guide specifically for folks in Kuwait looking to get into drifting, well, without needing a massive budget in 2025.
Exactly. Forget those, huge 5,000 kWd plus builds just for the car. This guide is all about realistic options, what's actually out there,
Yeah.
and the real costs involved right here in the local market.
Right. It's like the roadmap you need if you're serious about sliding, but, on a budget.
Yeah.
And our mission here is basically to unpack this guide, pull out the absolute essentials for you, give you the shortcut to understanding what you really need to know, what cars to look for if you're not starting with a giant pile of cash.
Yeah, finding those sensible entry points. Because getting sideways should be, well, achievable, right? Not some far-off dream
Yeah.
only for people with super deep pockets.
Totally agree. So, okay, before we even talk specific cars, this guide really hammers home some crucial points, things you need to figure out before you even start looking at listings.
Yeah, the absolute fundamentals. And the number one thing for drifting, it's got to be rear-wheel drive,
Yeah.
period.
No shortcuts there.
None. The guide is crystal clear. Front-wheel drive just mechanically can't sustain a controlled drift like you need for the sport.
Hmm.
Power needs to go to the back wheels. Simple as that.
Got it. RWD, that's the non-negotiable starting line. What else is on that must-have list?
Well, a manual transmission is strongly preferred. The guide does say you can drift in automatic,
Okay.
but, the control you get with a manual over the power, the momentum,
Yeah.
it just makes things way easier and more precise,
Yeah.
especially when you're learning or, working with a budget build.
Makes sense. So, RWD, ideally a manual. What about the practical side, thinking beyond just the car itself?
This is huge, and the guide really stresses it. Community support and parts. Think about it. You're modifying a car, you're pushing it hard, drifting. Things will wear out.
Yeah.
Things might break.
Right. Inevitable.
Exactly. So having a strong local scene is key. You've got mechanics who know these cars, people sharing knowledge, and crucially, parts that are relatively easy to find and don't cost a fortune.
Yeah, waiting mints for some obscure part just kills the whole vibe, doesn't it?
Totally kills your track time and your motivation. And speaking of costs, this guide brings up something people really need to internalize. It's not just the price you see on the car ad.
Ah, the hidden cost.
Not even hidden, really. The guide is up front. It says the purchase price. That's just step one. You absolutely must plan on spending an extra 500 to 700 kWd on top of the car price.
Wow. Okay, so if I find a car I like for, say, 1,000 kWd, I need to be thinking that's actually a 1,500 to 1,700 kWd starting point minimum.
According to this guide, yeah. That extra chunk of change is specifically for the basic necessary mods they outline. The stuff you need to make a regular street car actually capable of drifting properly.
Okay, so what are those specific mods, the essentials you need that extra cash for?
All right, the guide lists 4 key things. First, coilovers. They let you adjust your suspension stiffness, ride height. Essential for managing how the car's weight shifts when you're sliding.
Right, control.
Then, you need either a welded differential or an LSD, a limited slip differential. That basically locks the rear wheels together so they both get power, even when one starts to slip. Makes braking traction predictable. Essential for initiating and holding a drift.
Okay, diff sorted. What else?
A bucket seat. This is for safety, mainly, but
Right.
also just to hold you firmly in place. You can't focus on controlling the car if you're sliding around in your seat.
Good point. And the last one.
A steering angle kit. This gives you more steering lock, lets you turn the front wheels further, means you can hold much deeper drift angles without spinning out. Super important.
Okay, so you've got your RWD car budget, plus that mandatory 500, 700 kWd extra for coilovers, diff, seat, and angle kit. Got it. With that dose of financial reality, let's get to the fun part. The guide's top 5 budget drift cars for Kuwait right now.
Yeah, this is the core list, the cars the guide points to as the most realistic, attainable options you'll likely find.
Kicking us off at number 1. No huge surprise here, maybe. It's a classic.
The Nissan 350Z,
Mm.
specifically the earlier ones, 2003 to 2006. The guide puts these generally in the 1,300 to 1,600 kWd range.
And why does it get the top spot in this guide?
Well, it's almost purpose-built for this stuff, isn't
Yeah.
it? RWD, solid V6 engine with, over 280 horsepower. And the guy points out it's just kind of built for sideways from the factory.
Mhm.
Plus, huge community, both worldwide and here. Parts are easy to get. And honestly, you can get it drifting pretty well with just those basics we mentioned, coilovers and locking the diff.
Nice. So if you're checking one out, what are the common things the guide says to look out for? The red flags.
Yeah, the usual wear items, definitely check the clutch condition, look for any leaks from the power steering system that can be a thing, and check the rear suspension bushings. They can wear out, especially if it's been driven hard.
Good tips. All right, sliding into number 2 on the list, we've got the European Challenger.
The BMW E46 covers models from about 1999 to 2005. This one, the guide calls the Drift King of Europe and mentions it might be a bit underrated here in Kuwait for budget builds. Price-wise, you're looking at maybe 900 to 1400 kWd.
And which specific E46 models does the guide recommend looking for?
It specifically mentions the straight six engines are the ones to go for. So the 320i, 325i, and the 330i. Those are seen as solid platforms.
Okay. And the advantages. Why pick an E46?
Well, the guide says mods are everywhere for these things. Huge aftermarket support. Apparently they drift really well, even pretty close to stock. Plus, they tend to be a bit more comfortable inside than some other options on this list.
Okay. Sounds good, but there's usually a but with older BMWs.
Oh, yeah, there is. The guide is really clear on this. Maintenance is key. And specifically, cooling system upgrades are pretty much a must, especially if you're going to drift it hard and regularly. You really don't want these overheating.
Crucial point. Okay, number 3. This one the guide calls a bit of a sleeper pick.
That's the Lexus IS 300, or, as it was known elsewhere, the Toyota Altezza. You can often find the older ones for around 1,000 to 1,500 kWd.
Sleeper pick. Why is that? What makes it sneaky good?
Well, under the hood, it often packs a version of the legendary 2JZ engine.
Oh, really? Like the Super family?
Yeah, exactly. Same engine family. The guide calls it reliable, strong. Now, they do mention it's not the fastest stock, so don't expect blistering speed out of the box.
Right.
But the chassis itself handles really well. Get those basic mods on it, coilovers, diff, and the guide says it slides smoothly, very predictably.
And it has a practical side, too. The guide mentioned something about that.
It did. Apparently, if you find a clean one and you keep it maintained, it can actually be a pretty reliable, totally legal daily driver, as well as your drift project.
Yeah.
Kind of the best of both worlds, potentially.
Interesting. Okay, number 4 on this budget list. This one links right back to number 1.
Yep, the Infiniti G35 Coupe. Price-wise, the guide puts these in the 1,000 to 1,400 kWd bracket, similar to the IS300.
And the connection to the 350Z?
It's basically the same car underneath, according to the guide. Shares pretty much the exact same chassis, same great VQ engine.
So you're getting similar drift potential, but maybe a slightly different package?
Exactly what the guide suggests. You get that same core ability to drift, often just needing a welded diff to really unlock it, but wrapped in something that feels a bit more luxury than the 350Z, as the source puts it. And it definitely has its own unique look.
Right. A bit more grown up maybe, but still capable. Okay, and finally, rounding out the top 5, we have the real budget king on this list.
The BMW E36. We're talking the 1992 to 1999 models here. And yeah, these are often found as existing drift projects, maybe a bit rough around the edges. Prices reflect that the guide says anywhere from like 700 up to maybe 1,100 kWd.
Wow, that's definitely the most accessible price point.
Mm.
What makes the E36 so popular for budget drifting, according to the guide?
Well, for starters, it's lighter than the E46 that came after it, which a lot of drivers prefer. Mods are just dirt cheap. Seriously, you can find anything and everything for an E36, and it won't break the bank. The aftermarket support is massive,
Yeah.
and the guide. It just says the E36 loves to slide. It's a raw, super capable chassis for drifting.
Okay, but at that price, you got to assume there's some downsides, right?
Oh, for sure. The guide definitely warns about potential issues. Rust is a big one. You really need to check the usual spots carefully. And finding one with an engine that hasn't been thrashed or isn't just plain worn out can be a challenge these days. Getting harder to find really clean examples.
Makes sense. You get what you pay for sometimes. So that's the top 5. But the guide also tossed in a few others, didn't it? Like honorable mentions.
It did, yeah. Briefly mention a few others that could potentially work on a budget. Listed the Toyota Soarer,
Okay.
the Mazda MX-5, the Miata,
Ah, the
and the
Mia.
Lexus GS300.
Right. And what was the general take on those? Why weren't they in the main list?
Well, the guide includes some caveats, like the Soarer and the MX-5. They might just be harder to actually find for sale here in Kuwait,
Yeah.
especially at a true budget price.
Okay. Availability issue.
Yeah. And the MX-5, while it's an amazing chassis, the guide notes it could be kind of rare and expensive here. The GS300 gets called a potential sleeper drift boat.
A drift boat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A big comfy Lexus they am. But apparently it can slide. But the main point with these honorable mentions seems to be, yeah, they can drift, but Finding one in budget, or maybe even sourcing specific parts, might be a bit trickier compared to the top 5. Depends on timing and location, really.
Gotcha. So, okay, we've got this list. 350Z, E46, IS300 Altezza, G35 Coupe, E36, plus those few extras. How does someone actually decide? The guide used an example, right?
Yeah, I gave a little scenario. Like, say you have exactly
Sure.
1,200 kWd just for the car itself. What could you realistically get? The guide suggests maybe a cleaner E46 could be in reach, or possibly a 350Z, but maybe with higher mileage. But it really depends on what's actually listed for sale at the exact moment you're looking.
Which really highlights that availability is just a massive factor in this budget end of the market, doesn't it? You can't just pick one and expect to find it easily tomorrow.
It's huge, yeah. And beyond just what's available, the guide kind of implies your choice boils down to your personal priorities. Like how much comfort do you actually want? Maybe that pushes you towards the G35 or the E46.
Right.
Or how much are you willing to deal with potential problems? Are you okay tackling E36 rust? Are you ready to budget for the E46 cooling system fix right away? How good are you with a wrench? Or how much do you want to learn?
And just personal preference too, I guess, like how it feels to drive or even just how it looks.
Exactly. It's a mix of the market reality, what's actually for sale, your tolerance for, let's call it, character building maintenance,
Right.
and what
Oh,
you actually value in a car. But all of that has to be filtered through that essential budget point we keep coming back to.
that extra 500 to 700 kWd for the mods.
Precisely. The guide is super clear on this.
Yeah.
You find the car from this list that fits your initial budget, fine. But you have to have that extra money set aside for the coilovers, the diff, the seat, the steering angle. Without those, according to this source, the car just isn't really ready to drift safely or effectively.
Okay, wow. This has been incredibly practical, super useful breakdown. So, just to recap, we've unpacked this guide focused on budget drift cars in Kuwait for 2025. We hit the essential things to know before you buy RWD, manual preferred, community, and parts.
And that crucial extra budget for mods.
Right, that 500, 700 kWd on top of the car price. Then we walk through the guide's top 5 picks. The Nissan 350Z, BMW E46, Lexus IS300 Altezza, Infiniti G35, and the BMW E36. Covered their typical price ranges here, the pros, the common things to watch out for, and we touched on those honorable mentions like the Soar, MX-5, and GS300 with their potential hurdles.
Yeah, the source really paints a clear picture. Getting into budget drifting, it's definitely not just about finding the cheapest car possible. It's really about that total project cost. The initial purchase, sure, but also those essential mods and being realistic about the ongoing maintenance that comes with, driving these cars hard.
Absolutely. And it really makes you think about the strategy, doesn't it? Like the guide almost poses this question implicitly. Is it smarter to maybe stretch your initial car budget a tiny bit for something potentially cleaner, maybe more reliable to start with, like a decent 350Z or E46? Could that save you headaches and maybe even money on immediate repairs right off the bat?
Or do you lean into the absolute lowest entry point, like the E36, knowing you'll probably have more work to do up front, maybe dealing with rust or engine wear, but you benefit from those super cheap, super available parts later on when things inevitably need replacing from drifting?
That's the real trade-off, isn't it? Finding that balance.
Exactly. Success on a budget, as this guide really shows, it's less about getting lucky finding some perfect cheap car, and more about being smart. Realistically balancing that initial price tag, the money you know you need for mods, and just being prepared for the ongoing costs of keeping a budget drift car doing what it does best. Going sideways. It's about choosing which set of challenges you'd rather deal with.